Before we get started with the episode, YouTube has released a new feature where you can hype videos for small creators. It puts us on a leaderboard and exposes us to more viewers. If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to hype this video, I would greatly appreciate that. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and leave me a comment. What's your favorite Halloween candy? What's your favorite horror movie? Thank you so much. Hello and welcome back to Chillers and Thrillers. I am your host Em, and in this podcast, I read true stories of people's encounters with the strange and unexplained. No comedy, skepticism, or gore, only 100% true spooky tales. Before we get started, thank you to the new Patreon subscribers, Marjorie and Adamanta. Your support goes a long way. If you'd like to join the Patreon, you can do so for free or for $3 a month. The paid tier includes 2 bonus episodes a month, ad-free episodes, and early releases as well. Also, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Adam, Lisa, and Ben. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great trip, and I hope I make your road trip a little bit quicker. This episode was originally going to be a standalone exploration of children's encounters with the supernatural, but I'll be splitting this into 2 parts. Tonight's episode, Part 1, will focus on past life encounters and childhood memories of reincarnation. Part 2, coming out September 30th, will dive deeper into general childhood encounters with the paranormal. If you've been listening for a while, you may remember that back in Season 1, I had an episode all about children's paranormal stories, including my own. In parapsychology, children are often believed to have a unique connection to the spiritual realm. The reasons for this vary, but my personal belief is that children, being newly arrived here from the spiritual plane, are still tethered to the energy and perception. They carry with them a kind of sight that fades as we grow older. There's also the belief that negative entities are drawn to the bright aura and vibrant energy of humans, and children, shining the brightest, would naturally act as beacons. Some of the most fascinating and thoroughly documented cases of this connection are found in stories of past life memories, where children recall details of lives they couldn't possibly know, unless they had lived them before. The Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia has been researching these kinds of cases for over 50 years. Some of the most famous examples include James Leininger, a little boy who would recall astonishing details of his past life as a World War II pilot named James Houston Jr., including how he died when his plane was shot down. What's especially striking is that many children who recall past lives also seem to remember the details of their deaths. And often, those deaths were untimely. Sudden accidents, violence, or dying very young. It raises an unsettling question. Is there a connection between those who passed before our time and the vivid recollection of previous lives? In this episode, I'll be recounting true stories of people or their children who had recollections of their previous lives. Now, let's not waste any more time. So get comfortable, turn down the lights, and listen in. Travis, submitted by user just this once. So I'm going to share a scary story. Really more of a scary fact of my life, past, present, and future than a single story, that only about 8 people on the planet know fully about, one of which is no longer with us, making the grand total 7. And now you will know too, random internet person. I've created a burner account for the purpose of telling the story anonymously because I'm afraid if people in my real life knew what I'm about to tell you, beyond the very few that do, it would undermine their faith in me as a sane, functioning, trustworthy, stable individual. But who knows? Maybe someone here has known something similar. And I think there is value in unloading the burden of a secret that in some strange way feels like it defined my life. The story begins about 23 years ago when I was only 4 years old. I was out for ice cream at Baskin Robbins with my mom, my dad, and my sister, who is 3 years older than me. We're sitting at a table together, finishing up our ice cream. I distinctly remember mine was mint chocolate chip when it happened. I actually don't remember anything but a blank. All I remember is eating the ice cream and then afterward. But I have heard the account of what happened from everyone else who was there, especially my sister, who can still get upset to this day talking about what happened, but who, unlike my mom, at least will talk about it. According to them, for no reason, I went from smiling, happy, normal 4-year-old me to a desperate, wild creature. No one noticed anything that could have prompted the transformation, but suddenly, I started screaming with all my young vocal capacity in horror. I threw what was left of my ice cream and then the napkin dispenser violently across the room, according to my mom and sister. My eyes went totally black, the pupils blacking out of the blue of my irises, and between screams, I kept gasping like I couldn't breathe. I was also saying, why, and no, over and over, repeating this between screams and hitting with all my might anyone who touched me. It was truly a scene. I ended up actually knocking the table we were sitting at onto the floor, which, when I came to, really shocked me. I didn't know I had the strength to do that. My dad had to hold me in a bear hug to keep me from hurting myself or anyone else, and I ended up scratching his arms so bad that they bled and took several weeks to heal. Amid the repeated no, no's, and why's, I also kept saying the name Travis. My sister said it was like a repeated wail of anguish. Travis, Travis. We didn't know anyone named Travis. In less than 3 minutes, it was over. I was me again. My eyes cleared, I stopped screaming, and I no longer was struggling against my dad's arm. And this is the part that I remember. What is really one of my earliest memories. The terrified expressions of everyone around me. My mom crying, which I had never seen before. My sister crying. My dad holding me and his arms bleeding, realizing it was his blood on my fingernails. The first thing I said was, what happened to my ice cream? And then when I saw the table on the floor, who did that? I was extremely confused. It was like in those couple of minutes, I was just gone. Now I was back. My parents took me directly from the ice cream shop to the ER, figuring they had witnessed some kind of medical emergency. But at the hospital, they couldn't discover anything that was wrong with me. And by then, I was fine. I was me again. It didn't happen again for 8 years. The next time was at a summer camp when I was 12 years old. A few nights before we were going back home, ironically, we had been telling scary stories earlier that night. We were trying to stay up as late as we could, and 4 of us in the cabin were still going strong. We each had a flashlight and were sitting cross-legged together on 2 top bunk beds chatting. We had a small radio with us that was playing one of the few stations that we could get in the rural area where the camp was, an oldies country western type station. And again, it was all the same as all those years before. For me, 1 minute we're sitting there in the dark, quietly talking, and another minute, all the lights were on, and my friends were looking at me in horror. "She's faking, right?" I remember hearing one of them say as I came to. Another asking me, "Are you okay? Please, are you okay?" Counselors from other cabins were now in our room, and everyone in our cabin was awake. Apparently, my screaming had roused them all from their slumber. As for what had happened, I received a similar report as the first time. That I was screaming and saying no and why over and over again, and oh God, and please. The 3 counselors were convinced I had been having a nightmare. I remember hearing the term night terror for the first time. But what they didn't realize, and what we couldn't seem to convince them, was that I had been awake. I wasn't sleeping when it happened. They had me call my parents first thing in the morning to report that I had a night terror. It wasn't until I came home from camp that I told them that wasn't exactly what it was. Of course, I wasn't sure what it was. All the next day, my friends and I went over what happened in detail. It hadn't lasted more than a couple minutes, but I had scared them, and they were worried for me. They told me I hadn't seemed like me. I didn't look like me. It was like you were someone else. And every single one of them reported the same fact. That along with everything else, I had several times said the name Travis. Who is Travis? They kept asking, and I had to say again and again, I don't know. I don't know anyone with that name. There was one other detail they provided that they had all witnessed and every single one of them noticed. My incident started exactly when a song came on the radio and ended when it finished. They didn't know the name of the song or who sung it, just that it was an old country song, but they all swore they would recognize it if they heard it again. They promised to tell me the name if they could figure it out. And one of them did. I almost want to say her name here out of sheer thankfulness, because this was the first real clue to unlocking this mystery. She told me both the singer and the song title. I told my mom and dad after I got her phone call, and we considered what to do with this information. Having seen what they had seen years before, they were taking my experience seriously. A few weeks later, at my request, my dad brought home the CD and we sat down in the living room. I wanted them to be with me to hear the song in case something happened. My mom held my hand as he hit play, clicking to the specific song number. The moment I heard the first notes, I felt my vision go black. I felt the most profound terror and despair I have ever known, like I was falling into a pit of darkness without end. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was all I could do to choke out "stop" before my dad instantly stopped the song. I laid on the ground, breathing deeply and fast, and my mom stroking my hair. I was still me. It was close, but I hadn't gone this time. To clarify how careful I am to avoid the song, I just double-check that everything is muted before I even attempt to find it online. I've heard plenty of other songs by this singer, which do make me feel a little weird, but it is only this song that creates that inescapable blackout terror effect. Luckily, it is not one of her more famous songs, so it's not very likely for me to encounter it when it's just out and about in the world. She's a great singer, of course. I have no bad feelings toward her. If anything, I feel a strange kinship. For years, this song terror, for lack of a better term, was a secret only my family knew, even if we didn't understand it. They took me to a child psychologist who said it was possible an acute trauma response, but we couldn't understand what trauma, and so that was a limited avenue of information. I had MRI scans and other tests to no avail. Because my parents didn't want to upset me or harm me further, and I certainly didn't want to experience the total blackness of horror feeling myself, we never played the CD again. In subsequent years, twice I had to leave a store or turn someone else's music off when I heard that song come on. Both times I felt the beginnings of that disappearing and gasping terror, but I was able to escape soon enough before I was gone. Again, it's a miracle that I've encountered the song as rarely as I have. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I started to be both more curious and more daring about this strange secret. I confided in my boyfriend, now husband, and we experimented in playing the song in the safety of our bedroom, with him turning it off when it got too hysterical. The same basic thing always happened. My expression would change, my eyes would go black, and I would scream and sob, saying why, and again, every time, the name Travis, over and over. Once, when I had purposefully gone into the state, my husband said loudly in my face, "Who is Travis? Who is Travis?" And according to him, I replied, looking directly at him, sounding like someone else. You. How could you? He turned off the song. After a while, we stopped with the experiments. It was not long ago that I received another possible clue to this mystery, to understanding this strangeness within me, or maybe you will think it's not a clue at all and just a coincidence. I don't know. My dad died 3 years ago from a heart attack, so we poured through all of his boxes of old documents, trying to get rid of stuff so my mom can move to a smaller place. My dad had been adopted, raised by an aunt who he thought was his mother until he was a teenager, when she told him the truth. His father had left his mother before he was born. She had then remarried, but died when he was so little that he had no memories of her. When this aunt told him of his real parentage, she also let him know that something awful had happened to his mother in terms of how she died. But my dad was the kind of person who didn't want to know bad things. Just as he wanted to protect me from the song and my terror, he wanted to protect himself from knowledge that hurt. So when, as an adult, he was given an envelope with information about his mother's death, he never opened it. This is literally true, as I was the first person to unseal it in the weeks after he died. When I did, I discovered that inside the envelope were newspaper clippings, 3 in total, about how his mother died. They described a story that I know is all too common, but no less tragic. One evening, in 1967, a wife was strangled to death by her husband in their home. Probably, the papers reported, over jealousy. I have since heard from certain family members that my dad's stepfather may have been suffering from late-stage Huntington's disease, which can cause aggression and irrationality. After he murdered his wife, the mother my dad never knew, and my own grandmother, he passed away. One of the articles recounts how the murder-suicide was discovered. Neighbors complained of noise because the radio was blaring at full volume. It was set to the Country Western Channel. And finally, the name of my dad's stepfather, Travis. There. My strange secret is out now. You can make of it what you will. For some reason, I feel calm and peaceful after writing this, as sad and awful as it is. I haven't heard the song since I discovered what happened to my grandmother that I never knew, that was taken from us before I could possibly know. I'm not sure what will happen when I do hear the song. I can only imagine it will be the same terror and feeling of losing myself. But I do feel differently about it. I'm not so afraid of experiencing it and not entirely sad. Some part of me feels like it brings me closer to those who are gone. I Already Loved You. Submitted by user Love Lady. When my son was very young, around 2 years old, we were camping by a lake. He put on his dad's straw hat and picked up a piece of driftwood and began to stalk his sister in the woods. He would duck behind trees and peer out, holding the driftwood like a rifle. We are a no-weapons kind of household, and he had never seen a gun, even in a book. We were freaked out, but shrugged it off. Fast forward a few months, and he began speaking in complete sentences, like an adult. He would sit on my lap and hold my face in his hands and say, "But I already loved you." At age 3, he became obsessed with helicopters and machinery of all kinds. Once, while he was in his car seat one day, he told me how an internal combustion engine works, and he was spot on. He also told me about the differences between helicopters and airplanes, and how helicopters lift off the ground using the blades to displace air. All strange, for sure, but kids are really smart, so I just thought he was a wonder kid. One day, shortly after his 4th birthday, he was playing with a toy helicopter, and he said, "Mommy, watch." He made an explosion noise and crashed the helicopter into the bed. Then, matter-of-factly stated, "That's how I died." He saw my look of horror and said, "Don't worry, I was okay, even when I was dead. I was flying in the sky all by myself. Then these men came and they showed me you, and told me that you were my new mommy, but you were a teeny tiny baby. And Mommy, I already loved you. I was a teeny tiny baby during the Vietnam War, and I truly believe that my son was a soldier who was killed in a helicopter crash. He was also my I see dead people kid, and there are some hair-raising stories there too. He's an extremely kind and lovely man now and has zero memories of this past life. I think about this story he shared with me, and it gives me hope knowing that we somehow choose this existence and there is purpose for our being here. Grace, submitted by user Runs Like a Weasel. My younger sister, when she was 3, started talking to my mom about, "When I was a big girl, you were a little girl." She said she went to my parents' wedding. She described her old self physically, and my mom said that sounded like her grandmother, Grace. My sister also talked about the greenhouse she used to live in at the end of the dirt road, and the fact that her mother, my mom's great-grandmother Matilda, died from a snake bite while they lived there. She described the snakes as pretty, and with the full description, my mom thinks she was describing a copperhead. Now, we live in northern Nebraska where there are no copperheads, and Matilda died in southeast Oklahoma, Copperhead region. My sister said she killed the snake with a hoe. These discussions always took place at bedtime. One day, we were putting around in the garden, and my dad was sitting down and sharpening the hoe with a file, and my sister told him he was doing it wrong. He told her to show him how to do it, and she put his hands on his and placed them in the correct position. And later he said that she was right, he was doing it wrong. This happened around 1980. My mother's grandmother, Grace, died in 1968, and her great-grandmother, Matilda, died in 1902. Although we don't know if the snakebite was the cause of death for my great-grandmother, Matilda. I was 15 at the time these little nightly discussions were going on, so I remember them fairly well. She probably told these things on and off for about 6 months, and by 4, she said she was tired of talking about it. The Surprise Party, submitted by user Bally Ballard. For as long as I can remember, I have had vivid memories of traveling on a bus with my mother and grandmother. I can recall bits and pieces of the bus trip, including seeing lightning strike a tree with several cows standing under it during a storm, and the bus getting a flat tire. I remember when we arrived at our destination's bus depot, being picked up by an older man and woman in a 1960s model car. I remember their house being on a hill overlooking the street. I remember their house had an avocado green kitchen and a bright blue bathroom. I even remember them having a surprise birthday party for me. The only problem was I couldn't remember who these people were. One day when I was a teenager, I asked my mom, "Who were those people you, Grandma, and I took a bus to visit? The ones who threw me a birthday party?" My mom told me I had never been on a bus, nor had I ever been thrown a surprise birthday party. So I told her all the things listed in the first paragraph. My mother looked at me dumbfounded and said, "I know the trip you're talking about, but you didn't go. You weren't even born yet." Turns out it had been my mother, grandmother, and my uncle, who died a couple of years before I was born, who had gone on that bus trip. They had gone to visit my grandmother's older brother and his wife in Indiana. It was the last trip the 3 of them would take together before my uncle was killed in a traffic accident. At first, my mom thought maybe I had heard her or my grandmother talking about the trip, and that's how I knew so much about it. She quizzed me about the layout of the house, how the furniture was placed, even what the birthday cake at the surprise party looked like. I answered every question correctly. What really shocked my mother, though, was when I told her I had come out of the bathroom after taking a shower, and everyone was in the kitchen, and as I rounded the corner, everyone yelled, "Surprise!" I even described how everyone had been standing and who was holding the cake. My mother told me it had been my uncle's birthday on the day after they had arrived at the relative's house, and my mother's aunt wanted to make a surprise party for my uncle. I don't know if I'm the reincarnation of my uncle who died before I was born, but I have absolutely no explanation for how I remember events of a trip he took years before I was born, or how my memories are all from his perspective. Fighter pilot, submitted by user Humble Lifeguard 616. When my youngest son was 2, he was playing in my kitchen cabinet. He put a metal strainer on his head and was making shooting sounds. I asked him why he put that strainer on his head. He looked at me as if I was crazy, put his hand on his hip, and said, "I'm an Army fighter pilot, Mom. Don't you know that?" I said, "No, I don't know that." And he said, "Yes, Mom. I crashed and burned, and when I woke up, I was with you." He was only 2 years old, and I never watched Army movies, nor had he been exposed to anything like that. But he was very clear about it, and I believed him without a doubt. Also, ever since I was 3, I've had a recurring dream, but more like a memory, of dying in 1923. It was 1923, and I was coming home from a vaudeville show with 3 friends. It was a big city, but I'm not sure where. I was dressed in a flapper-like dress with blue crystals dangling all over it, with a matching little disc-shaped hat. We were talking about how fun the show was, and I was so excited. I turned around to walk backwards so I could face my friends, and I stepped off the curb. A huge car with metal over the front tires was speeding and hit the left side of my body. I remember lying in the street, and the driver got out and seemed drunk. My friends were all gathered around with scared looks on their faces, and then everything went dark. In this life, I have a huge dark birthmark on the left side of my body, exactly where the car struck me. I'm always online researching for the dress I was wearing and the type of vehicle. The dress was something only a well-to-do woman would wear. I know I was 17 and came from a rich family. I have memories of a large home with stairs in the front leading to the door and servants in the home. There was a large yard where we had, or my former parents had, large parties. I don't know who I was, but I clearly remember that awful day. And this is why I believed my 2-year-old when he said he was an Army fighter pilot. Maybe we knew each other in that life. I don't know, but I know it was real. Funny Train Man, submitted by Anonymous. When I was little, I saw a picture of my great-grandfather. I smiled widely and said, "That's the funny train man." When I was asked what I meant, mind you, he died before I was born. He died before my mom was born. I told my mother that he brought me to them, and he wore a blue train costume. I also mentioned that he had had a purple ribbon in his hand. It turns out he was buried with his purple heart in his hand. I was too young to know or be able to describe him by memory, and no one had ever told me he'd been awarded a Purple Heart. My Uncle, submitted by user Constant Narwhal 7494. When I was around 12 or 13 years old, I had a strange dream about becoming a monk. My family is Buddhist, but since I am a girl, it's not possible for me to become a monk. In the dream, I was in a ceremony preparing to be ordained. However, the monk who was shaving my head encountered a problem when he reached my nape. He said I had a wound there and blood was everywhere. He panicked and told me I couldn't become a monk and then left the ceremony. After I woke up, I told my mom about the dream and pointed out exactly where the wound had been. My mom went quiet, then suggested I tell my grandma about the dream. That same day, we went to see my grandma and I shared the story with her. She also became silent after hearing it. Later, my grandma asked if I knew about my uncle's death. I told her no, as my family had never spoken about him before. It turned out my uncle had been killed. He passed away 2 months before I was born. On the day he died, he had been told to stay home, but he didn't listen. He went to a concert instead, where his friends got into a fight with some random men. My uncle and his friends tried to escape by riding their bikes home, but the men mistook my uncle for the person who had mocked them. They followed him on their bikes. Thinking he was safe, he eventually stopped, but the men caught up to him and attacked him from behind, severely injuring his neck. Afterwards, they left him unconscious on a train track. My grandma told me that my uncle had wanted to become a monk for her but never got the chance. Both my mom and my grandma were shocked when I pointed to the exact spot on my neck where he had been injured. And that's all for this episode. I really hope you enjoy these stories. If you're listening on the Spotify app, don't forget to leave me a rating and leave a comment. If you're listening on YouTube, give me a like and leave a comment as well. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a rating and review. It really helps the podcast be shared to others. In the meantime, I hope all you ghouls and ghosts stay safe, and I'll see you for part 2 of Children's Encounters with the Paranormal very soon.